Hi, and welcome to another edition of Studio 411. I'm your host, Larry De Silva. Well, it's always nice when we have returning guests joining us with new projects and new activities to talk about since they last visited us. We have a marvelous singer, actress, and now author joining us. But before we bring her up, we're actually going to take a look at a clip of probably one of the first movies she was in, a beach party classic called Bikini Beach. And we're talking about singer, actress, and now author Donna Loren. Let's take a look.
Summer's here, it's a holiday. School is out, now it's time to play. Just take the school books out of reach. We're gonna go to Bikini Beach. That's it. That's right.
Everybody's going to Bikini Beach to have fun in the sun with that musical beach party gang. Frankie Avalon, Annette Funicello, Martha Heyer, Harvey Lembeck, Don Rickles, and special guest star Keenan Wynn.
I'm determined to prove that you young people are borderline cases leaning toward feeble-mindedness with an abnormal preoccupation with sex.
Bikini Beach. Surfin' Monkey Shines versus The Call of Love.
Every time we kiss now, it's plain to see.
It's Watusi time! Well, they all stand up as the idols by. Gonna cheer 'em on for the record try.
yeah, now that's the way. Oh, yeah. What did you say?
Bon Zipper's Rats.
You so big!
Versus the beach party gang going drag strip.
What the money can buy. Oh, yeah. Come on, little girl, and I'll tell you why. Oh, yeah. The secret of the whole affair. Give a little love and tender care. If you're gonna get him and keep him there, then love's a secret weapon. Then love's a secret weapon. Yes, love's a secret weapon. Yeah!
Do you believe this?
And now we have taken a trip down memory lane. Ms. Loren regaled us with a song there, or part of a song from one of her first films, Bikini Beach. Of course, Frankie, Annette, and all the rest of the beach party gang. Donna Loren joins us today to talk about her latest book called Pop 60s, which she has co-written with Dominic Priori. Pop 60s Shindig, Dick Clark, Beach Party, and photographs from the Donna Loren archives. We welcome back Donna Loren. Donna, thanks for coming back. How are you?
Thank you, Larry. It's nice to hear from you. And doing well. How are you?
Doing good. After I had that marvelous, we were talking food before we went on the air, so now I'm hungry. So Donna's quite the cook, but we'll wait till she does a cookbook, and then maybe we can get her in here to use our kitchen to.
That would be a pleasure, honestly.
Very good. By the way, the book published by Rare Bird Books. Say that 3 times. And again, for more information on Donna, DonnaLoren.com. I know when you joined us a few years back, you had mentioned that you were working on the planning stages of the book. Again, how did the idea for the book, as it turned out, come about? How did you connect with Dominic? And again, I assume it met with your satisfaction in the end.
Yeah, well, it started with a box that was taped up and collecting a lot of dust in my garage. And I received it shortly after my my adopted father passed away in 1999, and my mother had sent it to me, and I just never got around to opening it. And finally, my husband, Jared, said, hey, let's dust off the box, open it up, and see what's in it. And we discovered thousands of negatives, thousands of slides. And, in these times, rather than getting one of those little windows or, a glass box, we had everything digitized. And that's when Dominic got involved and came to view these photos. And, he, to be honest, looking at the past is not always the easiest, for the subject. Speaking about myself, there's fond memories, there's mixed feelings, it's normal. And so it was good to have somebody objective involved. And so he kind of got excited and said, I think I can get us a book deal. And he went to this very young entrepreneurial guy, and who he's kind of like an old school publisher who started out in PR at a place called Book Soup in West Hollywood. And he decided to go for it. And so then Dominic and I just dug in, and with Jared's help, because neither one of us people in the arts are the tech-savvy people, so Jared, who is, sat in, and between the three of us, we came up with a selection, and here it is.
Here it is, indeed. Now, your dad, Maury, or adopted dad, which we'll get into a little bit more, as I came to realize, didn't know this when we spoke the last time, was an animator at, was it Disney or Warner Brothers, or both?
All of it.
All of it. Okay, so yeah.
Oh, yeah. I remember my quote-unquote dad used to say the names Max Fleischer and Iwerks and Termite Terrace. I mean, he was one of the first, and he and his brother Lou. I remember seeing pictures of him standing in between Tex Avery and Chuck Jones way back in the early days, when they were wearing those trousers, I guess they call it a zoot suit trouser, with the high waistband.
Get ready to dance, yeah.
And the wire rimmed glasses, yeah. So, yeah, they all started in, when it was such an incredible art form. And then I think he got a special project which was described in the book at the end of my book, where Walt Disney was sympathetic in the war, World War II, and chose a handful of animators to paint the noses of the fighter jets to kind of pick up the spirits of the pilots during their battles. And so my dad, was chosen as one of those people.
Very talented man, and then later on became your manager, and ultimately, as you became a young adult and you decided to, which is not unusual, happens in many cases, move on from him in the sense of as your manager. Obviously, then you got married, started a family. But again, what I was fascinated by, at 8 years of age, you did your first radio commercial. At 9, you cut your first record. And at 10, as we talked about the last time you were here, you appeared on the Mickey Mouse Club. But 10 was a very important turning point in your life. Unfortunately, you didn't realize it until you were much later. Talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Yeah. Yeah, little did I know that the first 10 years of my life, my mother had been receiving child support from my biological father. And this news came to me when I was almost 50. So it was quite stunning. But I just have a very vivid memory of being taken to the Board of Education, weighed in, measured, and being given my Social Security number to work on the Mickey Mouse Club. And that was several days before my 10th birthday. So officially, on my 10th birthday, the child support stopped, and I began earning. I mean, earning more significantly than my dad, who made no bones about it, that, I could earn more in one day than he could earn in a week with overtime.
Wow. That's amazing. And then, of course, as the years went on, you became as they would say, a hot commodity. And, of course, then I'm sure in their minds behooved them to further your career, and things started to take off. And in some ways it was good, but looking back at it, you wonder, well, you were like a money machine at that point.
Well, how do I say this? I feel like I had to earn my keep, in the family, because of this secret that my mother chose to keep.
Sure.
And pardon?
No, I said I totally understand, and that must have been quite a jolt to kind of get that information much later on in life. But again, you've persevered, and you've done quite well, and I think you've handled it very well. But anyway, on to different subjects regarding the book. You dedicated the book to the Shindig creator Jack Good, who again was, I'm sure in many ways, a mentor to you and many others. Jack unfortunately passed away in 2017. Talk about Jack and the influence that he had on you and the fine work that he did.
Thank you. Thank you for asking. Yeah, he's one of those larger-than-life figures. And I had the good fortune of speaking with him before he passed away. And I, sent him the book, and hopefully he received it in time. I never had an affirmation of that. But I met him when I was 17 years old. And literally, out of anyone in my memory during my concentrated career, especially, thinking about Dr. Pepper time, from 16 to 21, when I really, that was my life. He was the only one I can think of that ever asked me, "What do you think?" He included me in decisions like, a song decision, a costume decision, a hair decision, a makeup decision, a set decision, maybe even singing a duet decision. And that was very empowering. So, plus he set it up in a theater venue at ABC, which had a live audience, great sound, wonderful lighting, lots of space, and it was extremely theatrical. It was very spontaneous, even though we did have rehearsals. But once, it was a live show, and once it started, we just ticked along. And so he captured a lot of excitement of that era, when it was the beginning of the British invasion. It was, a melding of the R&B era and the Elvis era and the Beach Boys era, East Coast, West Coast, across the ocean, putting it all together on one stage. And also taking on the challenge of mixing blacks and whites, and mixing us all up on one stage in very close proximity, which he kind of caught hell for a little into the show. And from being a #1 show, it only lasted about, I think, 16 or 18 months, because it was too raw in those times, for executive television people to accept the idea of the mixed races in that kind of an environment of oneness, sharing, joy, music, communion, all of that. And so it didn't last.
It's funny, I'm reminded a couple of years after Shindig went off the air, there was a special that aired on NBC with, of course, singer that I don't think she was on Shindig, but of course a big part of the British invasion, Petula Clark, where she did a duet with Harry Belafonte, and that raised all sorts of hackles all over, and the networks backed off, and because again I'm sure there was a lot of flack, but again, which leads me to one of the next people that are a big part of your career. You were always kind of paired either doing a solo number or with the gentleman who wrote the foreword to your book, in this case Bobby Sherman. But I can only imagine if you had been paired with someone like Little Richard or I don't know, my buddy Mel Carter, if he had been on the show, or someone from that era, it would have been, oh my God, and it's so ridiculous today when you look at it. But as you said, the southern stations, just like they did with Ed Sullivan back in the day, the only difference was Sullivan had more power than I think Jack did, so that probably was the big difference there.
Well, I can't speak for Ed Sullivan, but Jack had a unique situation because even for a very short time, he did take, the initiative to say to the networks, put your grievances down on paper, and I'll present it to my friend, Robert Kennedy, who's our Attorney General. And they never did. And that's literally, he kind of, bamboozled the network into getting them on the air because they were too shy or too skeptical in following through on that. They didn't want to put it in writing.
We've got a photo here off to my left of Donna, probably during one of the beach party shootings, and sitting on a very nice hot rod here at the beach. And again, Donna Loren joining us for the hour here on Studio 411. The book, Pop 60, Shindig, Dick Clark, Beach Party, and Photographs from the Donna Loren Archives. Again, Bobby Sherman wrote the foreword to your book. Nice man. We have a photo of you and Bobby from not too long ago. Did you think that Bobby, after Shindig ended, he pursued his acting career, of course, did you think that he would become the big pop singer that he later did in the 60s and 70s?
No, why not? Actually, not that long ago, Bobby said to me, he said, I was looking for you. I wanted to do a kind of a pre-Sonny and Cher show, and ABC was looking to, find a slot for you and I. I said, oh my God, all these years later, you tell me that, So yes, there's no doubt that he had that charisma and the ability and personality to capture the hearts of all the young girls of that time, and I think he kept that charisma.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to do this before I forget. When Donna was on with us last time, I tried to stump her with a trivia question, and I have one actually from Bikini Beach that we saw the movie trailer before. Let me see here. Let's see how good Donna is. Who played in Bikini Beach? Who had a very, very iconic actor, had a small part as the art dealer? Do you remember?
Art dealer. Well, art dealer. Oh, well.
He was a big horror and monster icon.
You have stumped me. I mean, I remember lots of names that appeared in. You're talking. Well, first I was thinking Keenan Wynn, but he didn't play a monster.
No. This gentleman played an art dealer, but he was best known as in the monster and horror film genre.
So could it have been Boris Karloff?
There you go. Very good. If I had a bell, I would be ringing it as in the affirmative. Very good. Very good. Yeah.
Oh, excellent.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Now, see, she knows. Also, another photo here. We're chock full of photos that most of these aren't even in the book, so you can imagine how great the photos in the book are. Your buddy here, Mary Wilson. Now, you guys go back to the Dick Clark caravan days when Mary was part of the Supremes. Still remain friends with her, I see.
Yeah, Mary, she's still out there, She takes her acting lessons and, travels all over the world. And I saw her recently in Palm Springs, where we live now and are nearby. So, Mary and I, and well, of course, Diane and
Florence.
Florence.
Yeah.
We're on a bus together for probably almost 3 weeks, and it was mostly in the South. Just before their "Where Did Our Love Go" hit, so I remember that when they started the tour, they were not known. And, when they closed the first act and Dick Clark would announce them and the applause would be, mild. And then by the end of my time with them, because I left midstream to go work for Dr. Pepper again, audiences were reacting because now their record was getting a lot of recognition. And it was not only Where Did Our Love Go, but Baby Love.
Oh, as well with them, it just became an onslaught of hits. I mean, it was a remarkable career. I always thought Mary kind of not only was the prettiest of the girls, but also extremely talented, and nice to see that she's still doing well. And hopefully at some point we'll also have her on the show. Speaking of Dr. Pepper, 1963 or thereabouts, you signed a 7-year contract. We're looking at a photo of Donna on a billboard. Relax, refresh, enjoy Dr. Pepper, singer Donna Loren says. And they certainly put you in some interesting outfits, I must say, on these billboards.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought they were normal for that time, no?
No. I mean, it just, it's the beach garb for sure. But you also, and we didn't get to see, there was a photo earlier. You designed a lot of your clothes. Now, tell me, I assume you learned this technique from your mom or a relative. Where did you become so proficient at designing your own clothes, making your own clothes? I mean, you really, you even wound up with a commercial contract or a publicity thing with one of the fashion makers of the day.
Yeah, Simplicity Pattern.
Yeah.
That was a campaign they did, if I can sew, you can sew. And they were looking for, quasi-celebrities who could actually sew. So I had to comply with that and make what I wore in that commercial. But the first public outfit I ever made was the little jumper that I wore on Mickey Mouse Club. My mother and I teamed up. I didn't particularly care for sitting at the sewing machine that much. So she would take my drawing, I'd pick out fabric, and she would measure me and do the construction, and then I would do all the handwork. So if you pay attention to the skirt that I'm wearing, you'll see some musical notes. I hemmed the skirt, I sewed the buttons on, I sewed the sequins on and made those musical notes. That was my first costume. And then through the years, I kind of just meditate and enjoy watching old movies and sewing. And now, after all these years, I construct only by hand. And every year I do a project or two, and sometimes I do it for myself, and sometimes I do it for my husband or my grandchildren. Anybody who's willing to receive.
There you go.
You may be next. You never know.
Oh, thank you. I'd be honored. And for a while there, when you were living in Hawaii, now you had you did some clothing design, and you had some fashions that you were featured. Am I correct on that?
That was really quite a serious venture that started out. If you've ever been to the tropics, it's kind of tough to be comfortable in the clothing you wore where you live. Have you experienced that?
Maybe here in Ansonia in a hot, humid July day, but no, not the tropics. But I get where you're coming from.
So when I moved to Hawaii in 1995, I discovered I'm not a muumuu girl, and so I had to find what I could wear. And in this teeny tiny town on the Big Island in North Kohala, about an eighth of a mile from where I lived, were these two women who were silk painters. And I met them, had them do a project for me, and then asked them if they would teach me. And so they decided to let me in their studio, and I learned some technique, and then that kind of evolved, and then I made a collection, and that took me about 2 years. Everything was very couture, French silk, French paints, everything hand painted. And ironically, my first fashion show that I ever did was in Monte Carlo in honor of Ivana Trump, who was Woman of the Year.
Wow, I don't even know where to go with that. All righty, wow, that's interesting. There you go. All right.
I don't know where to go with it either, Larry.
I don't know. We can always edit that out, but no, I'm only kidding.
All I know is I ended up giving an outfit, handmade jewelry that I designed, a handmade hat, and shoes, custom shoes, and a garment, and gave it to Ivanka when she was about 17, and she wore it to her mother's luncheon.
There you go. I did not know that. See the things when we veer off course a little bit, the little nuggets there. Here you go. Here's one too, and again we're talking with singer, actress, and now author Donna Loren. The book Pop 60s, Shindig, Dick Clark, Beach Party, and photographs from the Donna Loren archive, published by Rare Bird Books. For more information on Donna, DonnaLoren.com. Was interested to see that you dated a gentleman by the name of Bob Linkletter for quite a few years, and tell the folks who Bob was related to. I thought this was cool.
Well, if you remember, People Are Funny. No, what would the kids say? The darndest thing, and People Are Funny, right?
And then later House Party on CBS.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
Bob and I met when I was 14. He was 16. He had a very cool Chevrolet station wagon that he put his surfboard and guitar on. And my parents, who were extremely protective of me, were impressed that he was a Linkletter, and so they made an exception and let him visit me at my house, where we would dance to Johnny Mathis's Chances Are. And I was 5'3", he was 6'3", so
Interesting.
slow dancing in the back room, listening to Johnny Mathis.
Yeah, and Mr. Linkletter's dad, for those of you who haven't quite grasped it yet, was the famous Art Linkletter of the shows we talked about. House Party, People Are Funny, Kids Say the Darndest Thing. Again, a gentleman that lived well into his 90s, almost made it to 100. I was going to ask, we had a photo here, but I lost it now. There was a woman that appeared in several of the Beach Party movies. I didn't really know her, and she's still with us, if I'm not mistaken. A woman by the name of Susan Hart, and I thought, wow, she keeps showing up in these movies. Well, it turns out that I guess she, through marriage, was related through one of the producers of the Beach Party franchise.
Well, I didn't know her really, but yeah, I heard that at the time anyway, she was Jane Nicholson's girlfriend.
Yeah, later wife. Yeah, I was surprised to hear that, and I thought, well, that explains why she was in so many of these movies and several others that that were not necessarily Beach Party or American International Pictures, but she, when I guess Mr. Nicholson died, she inherited several of these films. The ones like the one I have in my hand, these were sold off to MGM United Artists, and then she kept the ones like I Was a Teenage Werewolf and a bunch of other classics that AIP made. So she made herself quite a little tidy fortune, from what I understand, as a result of choosing. But she didn't choose these movies. I don't know. I think she missed the boat. I don't know. I'm a Teenage Werewolf. I don't know. I don't know. We've got a great shot here, which leads me to my next question. You in the center, Jimmy O'Neill, host of Shindig, on the left, and a very young and talented Neil Sedaka on the set of Shindig. Talk about Jimmy O'Neill, a great disc jockey, host of Shindig. What happened after that show ended? It seems like he went through a lot of difficulties in life.
I wish I could tell you. I really didn't keep up with him that much. I just know that he, in his heyday, he was LA's top DJ on KHJ. He always had a gorgeous voice and a beautiful demeanor, personality. I did see him probably in the last 5 years before he passed away at the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood, where some footage of the Beatles on Shindig and various other rare footage things were shown, and he made a little public appearance. And at the time, he was having difficulty walking, and he sure didn't look well. So, but I think in spirit, he was, he's still with us, I'm sure, and shining a light.
Yep. I've seen some images of Shindig. There's a couple even in your book, I believe, taken by your dad, I'm sure. But it's amazing what a difference some of the images, even of you with some of your co-stars like the Righteous Brothers and Bobby Sherman and so many others, Darlene Love, that were taken in color. And, it's just a shame that that program just missed being broadcast in color. The conversion was kind of in the mid-'60s was starting to happen. There is a certain beauty in black and white, don't get me wrong, but I wish that there had been some of these shows that could have been saved in color. I think it would have been, would have really made an impact on the audiences of today.
Well, I guess my dad, he was famous for having all these cameras strapped around his neck. And so he probably loaded one with black and white and loaded one with color, and fortunately some of those survived. So.
Another gentleman you worked with quite closely on Shindig, we have a shot of you and he a few years before his passing, a couple of years ago, the late Glenn Campbell. Glenn, of course, in retrospect, people just rave not only what a great performer he was, but what a fine musician he was. Talk a little bit about your friend Glenn Campbell. Yeah,
he well, in Los Angeles anyway, he was the best. 1961, I believe, is when I met him. I was 14, and we were both signed to a company that was a publishing house for songs, and we both did demos, demonstration records for the company, and then Glenn became involved with the Wrecking Crew, the group of musicians out of Los Angeles that worked on just about every hit record that came out of LA, and at that time, and he had a reputation not only of being a great musician, but the fastest. And I remember, what's his name, Roy Clark?
Yes, yeah, from He
and Roy Clark would do these dueling guitars, and it's like, how fast can you pick, and how accurate can you pick? So yeah, he definitely, the guy from Delight, Arkansas, he was a terrific musician and had such an incredible range in his voice.
What was interesting was when he was doing Shindig, he was kind of, still trying to break through. I remember even Brian Wilson even wrote a song that he did. I know he did it on a couple of the shows like Hollywood A Go-Go and Shivaree, and I don't know if he did it on Shindig, but just didn't seem to take off. Then a couple of years later, after you guys weren't working together, he latched on with Jimmy Webb and Capitol Records, and then it just all hell broke loose. He just became one of the biggest things of the late '60s.
It's true.
Yeah. Another photo of Donna here with another gentleman that we lost too young, Bobby V. What memories of Bobby V? I guess he did Shindig a few times.
Well, Bobby V, I think he was an artist on Liberty, and it's interesting to me. I'm going to veer off a tiny bit. My first husband's father owned Liberty, and I just recently saw this incredible photo of Bobby V and my young ex in the background of, I guess it was a photo shoot for an album cover. But anyway, Bobby V was someone who was just part of the scene, and but a very lovely guy, and again a beautiful voice, for doing pop ditties,
Oh yeah, no, he was something else. And again, another gentleman that, correct me if I'm wrong, passed away again of Alzheimer's / dementia type situation, just as Glenn did. And again, just a shame that in both cases they had so much to offer. I mean, certainly Glenn, my goodness, he was working almost right up to the end. Where they could on a good day, I guess, work with him. Whereas I know some friends that knew Bobby V at the end, and obviously he had a chance to see him once and was not able to make it, and big regret that I didn't get to see that talented individual. We have a shot from one of the Beach Party movies. Of course, she was practically in all of them, as were you. Annette Funicello. Now you go back with her, of course, to the Mickey Mouse Club days. Tell us, I don't know, a fond memory you have of working with the lovely Annette.
Okay. Yes, well, one day my dad and I were having lunch on one of the studio breaks, and Annette was maybe 21 or something like that at the time, and very much in love with a young fellow named Jack Gilardi. And they showed up sitting in a booth not far from where my dad and I were, and all lovey-dovey. And it was just nice to see her having something normal in her life, other than being a child star and then being a teenage icon.
Yeah, and I was just reminded now, you two have another thing in common, that she, at an earlier stage in her career, she wound up working with a gentleman that, again, has done so much not only in entertainment but also for charitable causes. The late Danny Thomas, of course, a comedian, Make Room for Daddy, St. Jude's Children's Hospital. She worked with him for a year on Make Room for Daddy in the early 60s, and then you had a chance to work on a pilot that unfortunately wasn't picked up. I had a chuckle because it was about a Greek family, or a Greek young woman, and I guess the network execs thought that it was not the right time for that. I found that amusing in light of the Greek wedding film successes of the last 2 decades.
And ironic, I mean, I'll tell you the story. It's ironic that Michael Considine was in this show that I did for Danny Thomas. But going back to Love with the Proper Stranger with Natalie Wood and Steve McQueen, that story was written by a man named Arnold Schulman, who adapted the movie to television with Aaron Spelling and Danny Thomas. So in essence, I was playing that role of Natalie Wood, being the overprotected daughter and sister of an Orthodox Greek family, and Michael Considine played my oldest brother, and one of the sort of love interest was Bill Bixby, and Danny Thomas played the priest. This was pre-Norman Lear, just a touch before Norman Lear broke through with All in the Family.
There you go. So another year or two, and I'm sure that with the kind of switch to what they called in the early 70s more ethnic programming in a sense, or urban programming, then that would have fared probably very well. But again,
well, don't you think, Larry, that the 60s in just about every way you can think of was ahead of its time, but planted seeds for almost what's happening now?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And when you compare what's going on like over the last 5 or 10 years, again, in our lives here, I struggle sometimes to say, well, were things, crazier, then? I mean, I was fortunate. I was always allowed to watch the news and, kind of see what was going on with Vietnam and Nixon and with, everything in between, LBJ. And it's interesting, you look back, you say, there was like craziness going on. And then I'm like, you know what? I don't know. Maybe that was more controlled chaos than today. I don't know. It just seems different because,
Well, may I remind you that, when I was introduced as a Dr. Pepper girl in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963, that I was staying in the hotel on the corner, and I was supposed to be introduced at 1:30 p.m. So as I was getting dressed in my hotel room with my mother by my side, I'm watching the live broadcast of our president being driven right by our hotel, turning the corner, and then the bullet rang out. Bullets, I believe, but at the time it was, told that there was only one.
Right.
And, so I was in the midst of that era, and we had 3 major assassinations in the 60s. So it seems like it's out of control now, but I think what this is all about, personally, Larry, and stop me if you think differently or chime in, but I really think that we're living in an era where whatever's happened before is being completely revealed. Everything that's been under the rug is coming out, and all of this corruption, that's has been in existence for much more than this century, the past century. It's been in existence for millennium.
Sure.
And it's time. It seems as though it's time for the general awareness, to just have these kids that are protesting against the shootings at school, and the activism it's incredible. But basically it appears to me that people are beginning to take their power back after a very long time of abdicating their power.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I agree. And I think the difference there was, you believed what you were told. I mean, if you had a different opinion, so be it, but it was always kind of hard to prove. I mean, there are things like, Marilyn Monroe, that's always clouded in secrecy. JFK, Dorothy Kilgallen, she supposedly took her own life when, an hour or two earlier she was on live television. So the whole thing seems kind of, then they're all interwoven. That's the thing that's kind of bizarre, is that it's all interwoven within the same subject. And for those who don't know what I'm talking about, well, obviously then maybe we should do a show on it sometime to kind of unweave what's going on. But, in Vietnam.
Can I get a little esoteric on you?
Sure, go ahead.
So I read this book a while back, and it resonated in terms of frequency. And it supposedly, in some people's minds, that there's been a calculation that this planet has been resonating in a frequency that we've been living in for too long. And I think it was, during that 2012, remember that 2012 Mayan, revelation?
Yes.
That at least from my awareness, that the frequency shifted. And I think that personally, the reason that a lot of this corruption is showing itself so boldly is because they're not as comfortable, in this new frequency. Therefore, there's a struggle to survive.
There you go. Which reminds me of that song, What's the Frequency, Kenneth? So in this case, Donna will redo it as What's the Frequency, Donna? There we go. So I have our new hit record all mapped out.
Well, it's like tweak the frequency.
There you go. And speaking of tweaking, we've got this wonderful book, Pop 60s, Shindig, Dick Clark, the 60s in general, beach party photographs from the Donna Loren archives. In the remaining moments we have, by the way, speaking of which, I was thinking, when was this photo going to turn up? We have to get a shot of this lovely photo. Donna, again, with Mary Wilson, and Darlene Love. And I'll tell you this quick Darlene Love story, how it relates to Shindig. 2013, I had an interview, a meeting scheduled with Tommy James, the popular singer, 60s icon in his own right. I go to meet him, and at the same place, I realize, wow, Darlene Love is here. And luckily, I had a Phil Spector Christmas album on me. Don't ask me how. But I go up to her, and I said, big fan of yours, doing some charity work. I said, would you mind signing this album? And I said, it's so ironic, as I was driving up, the guy on the radio said that it was the 49th anniversary of the premiere of Shindig. So this would have been 1964, 2013. I told that to Darlene, and at first she had a look like I thought she wanted to kill me, because I think she was like 49 years ago, and I think she was hesitant in really accepting the fact that that many years had passed, if you catch my drift.
Sure.
But she was gracious, and again, she's doing great things. I'm so glad she made it into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But that's my Darlene Love story, and I'm sticking to it. So, speaking of musicians, I wanted to touch base. Tell me about one of your children. I understand he's a very successful musician, has played with Roger Waters of Pink Floyd fame. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, yes. Well, my son Joey is a drummer and has been pretty much his entire life. He was one of those naturally born musicians. And he started with Beck in their early 20s and still continues to work with Beck. Worked with, I can't even, mention how many people that he's worked with, but he signed a tour agreement with Roger Waters for Roger Waters' Swan Song tour, and presently they're in Europe, and they're starting in Portugal and culminating in Russia.
Wow. If they're allowed in by the time they get there.
Well, the point is, if you've seen Roger Waters' concert, he
I heard he's very political.
Yes, and yes.
Yeah, he was here on the East Coast not long ago, and he was very vociferous in his displeasure of certain things. So I'll leave it at that. But yeah. Lastly, before we say goodbye to Donna, and of course the book Pop 60s, I wanted to talk a little bit about this project that you were involved with. You were approached, a film that was done on the late Jane Mansfield, called Mansfield 66/67. We have a shot of the poster here from that movie, which looks fascinating. And tell me that you were approached by I believe, P. David Ebersol and Todd Hughes to do a video for that movie?
Yes, they are very good friends of mine. And Todd and David are almost neighbors now. I mean, when they lived in Los Angeles when I lived in Los Angeles a few years ago, and then when I moved to the desert, they ended up moving to the desert. And when they did, they told me about this project that they had been working on for many, many years, just as a source of intrigue. But now it was coming to fruition. They did a very unique approach. They went to England and worked with students in Leeds to do animation, choreography, and then they did the editing of documentary footage on Jane Mansfield. They created this very unique approach for telling this story, and very, very entertaining. So they approached me and said, you know, the Little Richard title song for A Girl Can't Help It is their parody song for this documentary, and would I sing it? So, of course, I volunteered, and with great pleasure have been supporting the film, which fortunately did very well.
And the song, which I was going to say, reminded me of one of the songs from Greece. I want to say, was it Wild Summer Nights or something like that? I'm blanking. And of course, I was thinking, yeah, reminded me of Little Richard as well. So I wasn't too far off. Donna?
Well, you know, Larry, you should totally take the time, have a ball, and watch A Girl Can't Help It, because in 1956, it is Jane Mansfield, but it's Little Richard, and it's Julie London, and it's Gene Vincent, and it's this whole host of classic rock and roll. I think it's the best rock and roll movie ever made.
It is.
And
there you go.
Cinematography is incredible.
And see, and I noticed that, Donna, I know you're into Italian classics, because I picked up that you are a big, no relation, but big Sofia and Marcello aficionado.
Well, I wouldn't say aficionado, honestly. I'm not an aficionado of anything, but I do enjoy their chemistry.
Absolutely, no, very good for sure. And now tell us, you've been doing some performing, which is great to hear. Any chance of coming east or beyond the West Coast?
Well, I don't have any plans right now, but you never know.
There you go. Well, we'll have to work on that for sure. So Donna Loren's been our guest today on this marvelous edition of Studio 411. The book Pop 60, Shindig, Dick Clark, the Beach Party movies, and photographs from the Donna Loren archive, along with co-author Dominic Priori. Donna, as always, we thank you so much for stopping by, and we look forward for your next project. But before we leave, we're going to take a listen at The Devil Made Her Do It. And again, special thanks for the music video theme song for the documentary Mansfield 6667 by P. David Ebersol and Todd Hughes, and the song performed by our guest, the legendary Donna Loren. Donna, thank you so much, and we look forward to having you on again real soon.
Thank you so much, Larry.
Take care. And we thank you for joining us on this episode of Studio 411. And we leave you with The Devil Made Her Do It. Well, we'll find out what that's all about. So take care. We'll see you next time. Thank you.